Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode. This is Marriage Made Possible, where we believe that all things are possible, including happy and great marriages.
That's
I'm
right.
Jasmine.
And I'm Troy, and we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Welcome to another episode.
It's episode 5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
time flies. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Um, so if you missed the last episode, we just kind of want to do a recap. Also, if this is your first time tuning in with us, go ahead, like, comment, share, and subscribe.
Yes.
So last week, we kind of talked about triggers and how we need to identify those triggers in order to
Yeah.
have inner healing, basically.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And in that video, we discussed exactly what a trigger is. So we
Mm-hmm.
learned that triggers are any external factor that can cause an intense emotional response. So a trigger can be a person, it can be an environment, it can be, a situation. Like a trigger can really be anything on the outside that can cause some type of emotional response. So we talked about the fact that it's very important for you to identify and know exactly what your triggers are so that you know how to navigate those triggers and you won't be so reactive in your response.
Right. So that was the second point.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to defining triggers, we talked about identifying those triggers.
Yeah.
And then we also talked about the consequences of
Yes.
unidentified triggers.
Yeah. And so that was really good because in that discussion, we learned that when you don't know what your triggers are, it
Mm-hmm.
really blocks you from becoming the best person that you can be,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's almost like at the drop of a dime, anything can kind of set you off. And I also remember that we talked about the fact that a trigger, when you respond, once you're triggered, it doesn't mean that you have this explosive response every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Your emotional response can be the fact that you just shut down emotionally and you kind of go into a shell. So everyone responds differently when they're triggered.
That's right.
Yeah.
Unidentified triggers can make you a ticking time
Yeah.
bomb, not only in your marriage, but just walking around in life.
Yeah, and that can
Mm-hmm.
be scary if you don't know what they are. We also talk about the fact that triggers can produce uncontrolled thoughts, emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and behavior.
Right.
So it's kind of like you said, like if you don't know what they are, you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
Not in the sense that you're going to blow up at the next person that says something to you that may have triggered a memory from your childhood, but it can just be any intense emotional response
Mm-hmm.
that you really have no control over once you're triggered.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd love for you to go back and check out that
Yes,
episode.
that was
Some real,
episode 4.
yeah, episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
Some great stuff in that episode. So episode 5. What are we talking about today, babe?
So today we're going to continue talking about this whole topic of triggers because I really feel like it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like a lot of couples can have a lot of healing and just a greater connection if
Mm-hmm.
they really know what some of their triggers are.
Okay.
But we're going to add in a topic of communication. So
Oh.
today, I know.
Huh.
So today we're going to be talking about how to connect with your spouse and communicate with your spouse even when you're triggered. So
Mm.
it's titled, are you ready for it?
I'm ready. Lay it
You
on
want to
me.
do the thing?
Brrr.
So today, our episode is called From Conflict to Connection.
Ooh,
From conflict to connection. So
man.
how to communicate once you're triggered.
Okay. From conflict to connection.
Yeah,
That's big.
it is. Yeah.
Because that's probably one of the
Hardest.
seemingly hardest things to
Yes.
do in marriage is coming back from a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's super important because you have to realize that your spouse is not the enemy,
Yeah.
that whatever issue that you guys are battling, that's the enemy.
Right.
And then there's a real enemy out there
Exactly.
that we also have to be watchful for.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
the quicker that we come back from conflict and the quicker that we connect, the better.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And it takes time and practice, like anything else in marriage. When you're learning these skills with your spouse, like
Mm-hmm.
communicating, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're doing it at a time where maybe your judgment is clouded, or
Mm.
you're in an emotional space.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so worth it. It takes time. It takes practice. and the more you do it, the better you will become. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I got the first part. It said from conflict, you said from conflict to connection,
Mm-hmm.
and then you said how to communicate when triggered.
Yeah.
So are you telling me that I have to communicate, even I still have to communicate in our marriage, even if I'm triggered?
Absolutely.
So being
Yeah.
triggered is not an excuse for me to just shut down, for me to disconnect,
Yeah.
or for me to be apathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of those things that you're talking about, like shutting down, becoming, apathetic, those are more so like symptoms, I think, like
Mm.
behavior.
Okay.
And it's important to learn how to communicate and talk to your spouse so that you can get to the heart behind why they are responding the way that they're responding.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I might need to take notes myself on this
Well,
this episode.
I'm not the expert. So, these are just, things that we have learned over the years,
Right.
of being married.
Yeah, so we want to share what we've learned with you. Again, like my wife and I say, we're not, subject matter experts on the situation, but we just kind of want to share our own experiences, what's been beneficial to
Yeah.
us, what's helped us out, and we hope and pray that it blesses you and it helps you out as well.
Yeah. So, what do you think, like, when you think back over the years of us being married,
hmm
like, what is the first step you can give advice and tell people to try to do once they feel they've been triggered?
So I think the first step I would say is you have to recognize that you've been triggered.
I think that's a good point. So,
hmm
just recognizing that, that, okay, I'm triggered. Because I think, like, when you do that, if you can make that first step and
hmm
say, okay, I'm having an intense emotional response,
hmm
I'm triggered.
Right.
I think that even though you may still have those emotions and you may still feel some type of way,
hmm
I would bet anything 9 out of 10 that you wouldn't respond back. You wouldn't respond the same way you would had you not been aware that you've been triggered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and this is the importance of, kind of that groundwork that we laid in
Mhm.
previous episodes, foundation, just talking about the self-awareness.
Mhm.
And this is when kind of your emotional IQ and your emotional intelligence has to expand.
Yeah.
If you don't have, or you don't have a clue or hadn't been in tune with yourself
Yeah.
emotionally, this is kind of where you kind of want to grow in that emotional
Yeah.
intelligence and take a step back and pause and recognize, okay, I've just been
Yes.
triggered. So within recognizing that you've been triggered, you have to understand your own emotions
Yes.
and you have to understand your own reactions
Yeah.
before trying to communicate with your spouse.
Yeah, and that's that, like you said, that's the groundwork work,
hmm
and that's that individual work. And so, as we're talking about this, like, is bringing back a moment. So, can I share? Can I share a moment?
Okay.
Okay.
Reach back and put my seatbelt on. Click. All
Okay.
right.
So no. So when we went to Florida
Okay.
a couple weeks ago,
Right.
so at the time, Isla was maybe just a couple weeks old.
Okay.
Okay, so postpartum, trying to learn how to be a mom and then, be healthy and get back to a place where I'm feeling comfortable in my body.
Okay.
So I was triggered. So do you remember when we were leaving the restaurant?
Mm-hmm.
We had a great time. Everything was, going really great. And um, just walking around and seeing like other women,
Mm-hmm.
and I think sometimes you can be triggered and things can happen so quickly that you don't even recognize it. So we're walking around,
Mm-hmm.
with Isla, enjoying ourselves, and I'm looking around and seeing like other women wearing like their cute little summer outfits and all that stuff. And here I am, a couple weeks postpartum,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm missing, my old body
Oh
and how I
man.
used to feel in my old body. And in an instant, I was triggered,
Mm.
and it completely made me shut down for the rest of that evening.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I had to, in that moment, recognize, okay, I'm triggered. I'm triggered, and this is what is triggering me. I'm comparing myself to, you know, other women that I'm seeing walking around, you know, and here I am, you know, a couple weeks postpartum. And so it did make me shut down just a little bit, but I was still able to talk to you, right? But something that helped me was when we got back to the Airbnb that night was I was able to sit and journal, and I wrote out everything that I was feeling, my thoughts, and I was still able to communicate with you that night. And so I think that you can still know, okay, I'm being triggered, but you can still have some type of control over how you're going to respond.
Yeah. You know, I wasn't sure. I think, you know, I was caught up in, you know, taking care of Isla and stuff like that. But I felt like something was off. I felt like, you know, the mood kind of changed. But you know, that's, you know, that's big that you recognize in that instant that, you know, okay, what's going on? Why do I feel this way? You know, I'm being triggered, and I just wanted to say that I hear you, and that I think that you are beautiful, postpartum, prepartum,
Thanks,
pregnant. Um, I'm in love with you more and more every day, and you know, ever since you having our daughter has made me fall even more in love with you, the person that you're becoming, not just as a wife now, but as a mother, my best friend, my rib.
Love you, babe.
Love you too.
All right. So, oh, I'm about to tear up. So yeah, so I think that that is a way that you can, you know, communicate with your spouse once you're triggered. You first have to be able to understand, you know, your own emotions and thoughts, because you can't take it to your spouse, and you can't expect for your spouse to first even know what is going on. You know, contrary to popular belief, your spouse is not a mind reader. And so your spouse does not know exactly what is going on with you. Like, no matter how long y'all have been married, no matter how close you all are, they are not on the inside of you. No one truly knows you that intimately except for God. And so you can't expect for your spouse to know what's wrong with you and why something is bothering you. So it's important for you to be able to identify your trigger and understand your own emotions and thoughts before you take it to your spouse. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add to that. The second part, I think, is taking a moment to identify what's causing you distress.
Yes.
So along those lines, old Troy back in the day, once you got triggered,
you would have got triggered.
I would have got triggered, and so
because that used to happen.
Yeah.
Like I used to get triggered, and my intense emotional response is to automatically shut down. Like I will shut down completely in a second. And so when I would get triggered and I would shut down, it would trigger you,
right,
and you have the opposite response.
right, yeah,
Right.
So you want to identify what's causing you distress. So previously, early on in our marriage, if Jazz is shut down and I could tell that the mood changed, then, you know, my antennas go up, as I like to say, and then I'm like, well, what's her problem? You know, why does she have an attitude? Now I'm triggered, so she's shutting down and I'm turning up. You know, I'm like, well, what's the issue? And that's not the way to respond either. But and since then, that's not what we do. But I'm just kind of using that as an example to say that once you understand your emotions, you understand what your reactions are, then you want to identify what's causing you to. So what is it that's causing me to feel this emotion? What is it that's causing me to react this way? Is it a feeling? Is it this place? Is it this person? You know, what's causing the distress?
And another good, you know, thing that you brought up in our previous episode was that it can be a lie, right? So we talked about, I believe in the book of Philippians, where it talks about how one little lie can permeate your entire belief system. So, for example, when we were, you know, when I got triggered on vacation, you know, I was to really sit down and think about it. It was the lie of me comparing myself to, you know, another person that I didn't even know. You know, the thought probably could have been, you know, they're more attractive, like they're in better shape. you know, all these different lies that I'm believing
Right.
about myself,
Yeah.
that permeated my belief system at that time.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's big.
Hmm.
So first point we've got recognize your triggers.
Hmm.
So what's next after you recognize your triggers?
So I think another great step that you all can take when you're trying to communicate what your needs are once you're triggered
Mm-hmm.
is to really just take a time out,
Mm.
right? So you identify what your triggers are. It's okay for you to take a break, you know. So no one is saying like once you're triggered, you got to stay in that moment. You got to communicate. Like that is not what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Taking time to yourself. So, for example, I told you I needed some time, you
Mm-hmm.
know, thinking back on vacation.
Right.
I needed some time and
Mm-hmm.
I took a pause. You
Yeah.
know, I was still present. I still, you know, if you asked me a question, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
was still able to talk to you,
Right.
but internally I was processing and I needed to kind of pause on the inside. So
Mm-hmm.
taking time for yourself is important.
Yeah, I think and as we're walking down the path of moving from conflict to connection, and as we're walking through these steps of how to communicate when you're triggered, we're talking. The first point we did was recognize your triggers. And now we're talking about taking a time out,
Mm-hmm.
guys. This isn't new stuff. These are kind of things that we've already touched on, and what we're
Yeah.
doing here as we're moving from conflict to connection is we're putting it all
Yeah.
together. So first, I have to recognize that I've been triggered. I
Yeah.
have to identify what's triggering me.
Yeah.
I have to identify my own emotions, my own responses, what's causing me the distress. So then I have to, if, and we recommend this, and again, this is just what worked for us. Then I have to take a time out. I have to,
Yeah.
take time to pause. I need to take time to process. I need to
Yes.
take time to do the work. What does this all boil down to? We talked about it before in another video, self care.
Yeah.
So this is taking
Yeah.
the time out as a type of self care.
Yeah.
And once again, it says, I love you enough
To go take care of me.
to go work on me
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
And that's the whole heart behind self care. That's the whole heart behind moving from conflict to connection. That's the whole heart behind communicating when you're triggered.
Mm-hmm.
Is I love you enough to take care of me, and I recognize that I have an issue right now that I need to take care
Mm-hmm.
of. So when you take that time out, make sure that you're intentional. Make sure that you're doing the work. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're not taking the time out and you're just stewing and you're focusing on the
Yes.
negative.
Yes.
Because whatever time frame that you and your spouse have allotted that says, hey, we're going to come back
Yeah.
and discuss this in an hour. We're going to come back and discuss this in 2 hours, or we're out in public right now and we want to discuss this when we get back
Yeah.
home. You don't want to come back with a negative attitude. You don't want to
Right.
come back with a wall up. You actually want to come back with an open heart, with
Yes.
open ears, and an open mind to
Yeah.
receive whatever it is that your spouse has to say, so that you guys can move from conflict
to
connection.
I see what
That's
you're doing.
what we're trying to get you to move from conflict to connection.
Yes. I see
Yeah.
what you're doing there.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. And so I think something else, so other than identifying what your triggers are, taking a time out, once you are at a place where you're ready to communicate with your spouse, so I think all of those things are like things that you can do on the back end
Mm-hmm.
in order to prepare yourself for that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I think that you can do before you actually get into, you know, the actual conversation is to really be smart about the time and place that you choose to have that conversation. So you don't want to have that conversation, you know, in front of other people, in front of the children, in-laws, whatever. You don't want to have it, you know, at the dinner table in front of friends. Like all of those are terrible times to have a, you know, communicate with your
Yeah.
spouse once you've been triggered. So you really want to identify a specific time and a specific place that you can talk about an issue once you've been triggered. So for us, I mean, it has changed over the years.
Right.
Something that helped us at first was we still have our marital check-ins. We used to do it on Saturday mornings, and now, you know, with Island stuff, now we have it Monday evenings. But
Marriage Mondays.
right, Marriage Mondays. So as long as you and your spouse have agreed upon a set time and space for you to talk about an issue, I think that's important, right? So
Right.
you don't want any distractions. You want it to be with you and your spouse in a very intimate and safe environment and setting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to find, or we recommend, now we're just recommending, you want to find a quiet place.
Yeah.
You want to find a place that's comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
not just for you, but for both of you.
Yeah.
I think for us, it used to be the park.
Yeah.
We used to go to the park. We used to find us a nice park bench,
Mm-hmm.
and just sit there and talk.
Yeah.
And it was therapeutic and it was refreshing because it wasn't our home. It was outside the home, and it was kind of like neutral ground, if
Yeah.
you will. It's like neutral territory.
Mm-hmm.
So time and place is very important. It can almost set the mood, if you will.
Yeah.
And we want to encourage you along the lines of time and place of when not to communicate. My wife touched on a few earlier, but I want to give you the acronym HALT. We can't take credit for this. This was created by somebody way smarter than I am. But HALT stands for hungry, angry, lost, or tired. That's not the time to communicate.
Yeah, those are probably the worst times.
Right, it's the worst time.
Yeah, I can think of a couple arguments we've gotten into where either one of us are hungry or angry. It almost happened this morning, actually.
We don't want to
You're hungry.
We don't want to get sued by Snickers, but you're not you when you're hungry.
Yeah.
So trying to communicate, with your spouse, and this is, it doesn't matter whether you're a guy or a girl, one of you or both of you turns into a bear when you're hungry, and it's not the time to try to communicate.
Have a good conversation.
When you're angry, is not the best time. You need to
take a time out.
Right, pause, let cooler heads prevail. Right, when you're lost, fellas, you know what I'm talking about. I know where I'm going. She's like, "We lost, ain't we?" You like, "No." That's not the time to try. It's not the time to try to have this deep, intimate conversation. First of all, we need to humble ourselves and ask Siri, you know what I'm saying, where are we going, or ask for directions, or whatever you got to do. And then tired, that's a big one.
Yeah,
man.
That's a big one. So I think that most Americans, work Monday through Friday. They're in that grind. So maybe not when your spouse is just getting home, like just giving them time to decompress, from a hard day at work. I think something that helps us is having like specific things to either talk about, focus on, and pray on throughout the week. So Mondays we talk about our marriage. Tuesdays is children. Wednesdays we talk about family. So these are just different days of the week that we kind of, if there is something that is going on, that we can talk about those specific things. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we only talk about those things on those days.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a serious issue that needs to be addressed,
you still need that specific time and place. So it's, it can be as simple as, hey babe, can we talk about something that is bothering me, tonight when you get home, or can we, take some time in about, a couple hours after we put the kids down to bed. You can definitely still have those conversations, but it's all a matter of just communicating with your spouse.
Right. Yeah. And when you select that time and place, you give your spouse the respect and the courtesy to kind of give them a heads up, so that they don't go in unaware.
And they're prepared for it.
So that they're prepared for it mentally, and they're not like, hey, whoa, like they walk in the door and you're attacking them, like, because you've been stewing on it all day.
They haven't even been thinking about it. Yeah. And so it's kind of taking them by by a blind eye, so to speak.
Right, yeah. And we kind of want to reduce that, because what does that do? It breeds more conflict.
Yeah.
So what is we're talking about moving from conflict to connection, how to communicate when triggered. What's the why behind the what?
Why behind the what?
Yeah.
So I think the whole point from moving from conflict to connection is so that you can have peace and unity within your marriage. Like nobody wants to have a marriage where there is no peace, where you're always getting into an argument. where you can't connect emotionally with your spouse. So it's so that you two can really have a deep connection, because conflict is going to come, right?
Yeah.
Because we're human.
Yeah.
But it's all about how you communicate once you're in that place of conflict.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's raining right now outside, and it was just sunny earlier.
Yeah.
We live in Georgia. It's gonna rain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at some point in time, it's gonna rain. And that's how conflict is. When you're in any kind of relationship,
Yeah.
conflict is it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is we have to be.
How are you going to respond to
Yeah,
it?
we have to respond appropriately.
Mhm.
We have to respond in a healthy way, and we
Mhm.
have to learn how to navigate that conflict.
Mhm.
And so, along those lines, kind of the heart behind this whole how to move from conflict to connection is Amos 3:3, and it says, "Can two walk together unless they agree?" So we can't walk together unless we agree. If we don't agree, then you're walking to the left, I'm walking to the right, we're in conflict, I'm going that way, you're going that way.
Right.
So in order for us to walk together, we have to agree. We have
Right.
to come together like we're supposed to in marriage. We have to be one. We
Mhm.
have to, I gotta lay myself down, you gotta lay yourself
Absolutely.
down. You and me gotta come together and go this way.
Yeah,
You know
absolutely.
what I mean?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, well, I think that those are some really great points to bring up. So, identifying your triggers, understanding your own emotions before you bring it to your spouse,
Yes.
really taking the time out and taking a pause if necessary before you try to go and communicate what your needs are to your spouse. And then identifying a specific time and place once you're ready to communicate what your needs are once you're triggered. Yeah. So next week we're going to continue. I'm excited because we're actually going to be doing like a demo type exercise
Oh.
to really kind of show a real life example of how to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Get my Denzel on. You know, I feel you. Well, guys, we just want to thank you for tuning in once again with us in Marriage Made Possible. We hope that this blessed you. We hope that we want you guys to put these steps into play, and we want you to move from conflict to connection.
Yeah.
And we want you to be able to communicate when you're triggered. Hey, tune in next week for another episode. We can't wait to get with you again.